Okay, we're going to begin. Let me get organized. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the Los Angeles Domestic Violence Task Force Day of Action. My name is Eve Sheedy. I'm chair of the city's Domestic Violence Task Force, and I'm counsel for domestic violence policy at the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office. Yay. Yay. Go City Attorney's Office. Okay, thank you for joining us. Today is a day that we recognize the work of those on the front line, our incredible domestic violence agencies, and our brave members of the Los Angeles Police Department who've gone above and beyond in their handling of domestic violence cases. Are the people who, in their daily work, offer safety, understanding, and support to those who are in crisis. These are the people who respond to the more than 48,000 domestic violence calls for service, and who do so in a city with limited resources, which offers slightly more than 500 domestic violence emergency shelter beds for a population of close to 4 million. By way of comparison, New York City, with approximately twice the population, has almost 5 times the number of emergency beds available. As recognized by our controller, our city needs to dedicate significantly more funding to domestic violence. Without our front line, abusers win. Batterers who cross the line and inflict physical and emotional injury on their intimate partners and children do so in private, often behind closed doors. While we all see the aftermath, injuries, homelessness, substance abuse, gang violence, and children who are traumatized, the people we honor today are those that respond to these terrifying incidents as they unfold. For these reasons and for countless more, we thank all of you on the front line, police and providers, for doing more with less and for your dedication to all who are victimized by those who choose violence over peace. Today our theme is domestic violence in later life, and yes, even our grandmothers and grandfathers are victims of domestic violence. We honor those survivors by focusing on the pearls of wisdom they pass on to us as a result of their experience. It is our responsibility to heed the advice of our elders so that we can continue to make Los Angeles safer for everyone. We are honored today to be joined by Kim Abeles, the artist who created the Pearls of Wisdom project. Please, at some time today, take a moment, or sometime during October, take a moment to view the display on the east side of the bridge to City Hall East, where these pearls are presented in both art and words. Reflecting that theme, today we award our Marjorie Browdy Award to Molly Davies, Vice President, Elder Abuse and Ombudsman Services at Wise and Healthy Aging. Ms. Davies' work, collaborating with others to provide comprehensive services to elders, is a model for us all. In closing, I want to thank all of our city officials, Mayor Garcetti, City Attorney Fewer, Controller Galperin, and Chief Beck, and each of whom has recognized the importance of domestic violence. Councilmember Mike Bonin, who is our champion of domestic violence in City Council, LAP detectives Yvonne Ortiz and Casal Bunn, members of the Domestic Violence Task Force, Cheryl Bookout and Christy Turek from A Window Between Worlds, and Nadine Shimoji, the glue that keeps the task force together. It is now my honor to introduce Katie McLean. Ms. McLean is an award-winning actor, producer, writer, teacher, and inspiration. For those of you like me who watched All My Children, you will recognize her as Dixie, the moral compass of all of the characters who lived in Pine Valley. See, there's a lot of people who watched. Okay. But I'd been in it. Miss McLean is a 2-time Emmy Award winner for her roles in All My Children and As the World Turns. She recently received an Emmy pre-nomination for her role on The Young and the Restless. She has starred in many independent films, off-Broadway productions, and television shows. Miss McLean also wrote, directed, and produced an award-winning short film, the world of Albert Fu, I think it's pronounced. Her company, Devil in the Machine, is working on the creation of an internet distribution channel due to premiere shortly. She is currently shooting an art film and a documentary. Ms. McLean brings a personal connection to this event and to this work. She authored a memoir, Murdering My Youth, which provides an in-depth look into her childhood as a child actor surviving in an abusive, alcoholic family system. The book, released in spring 2004, has been extremely well received. I'm personally reading it, and it's very moving. Ms. McLean has been so gracious and supportive leading up to this event, so much so that she is here with us on her birthday. It is my pleasure to extend my birthday wishes and to introduce Ms. Katie McLean.
Thank you so much. Good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. It's kind of a hot night and kind of a hot morning, but we're here for a beautiful cause, so thank you for standing strong. It is my birthday, and I can't think of a better way than to spend it here with you. I would first off like to welcome, where is he, our mayor, who's somewhere here, the Honorable Eric Garcetti, Los Angeles Police Chief Charlie Beck, Council members Mike Bonin and David Rue, City Attorney Mike Fuhrer, and City Controller Ron Galperin, Executive Officer of the Housing and Community Investment Department of Los Angeles, Laura Guglielmo, Deputy Consul General of Los Angeles, Gilberto Luna Moises, Vice President of Elder Abuse and Ombudsman Services, Molly Davies, our wonderful Eve Sheedy, Chair of the Domestic Violence Task Force, and the gathered members here of the Domestic Violence Task Force, honored guests, including my husband, John Lindstrom, and if any of you watch True Detective, you'll probably want to talk to him afterwards, and the gathered members of the Los Angeles Police Department. Ron, we paid the parking ticket, right, John? Yeah, we covered that? Yeah, okay, good, all right. So, as Eve said, that was a little joke, sorry. We did, okay. My name is Katie McLean, and if you have no idea who I am, it probably means you didn't grow up watching soaps with your auntie, grandma, nanny, or mom. I basically spent a lot of time in front of the camera being kidnapped, hanging off cliffs, giving away a body part or two, and trying to find a baby. Whether it was my baby or somebody else's, it really didn't matter, that wasn't the point. I just needed a baby. I've won a bunch of awards for these shenanigans, and it's been lovely, but behind the scenes, I was really struggling with memories from my upbringing that, although could have fit into a melodramatic plot, were a bit too real for my comfort. And this brings us to the reason that we are here today, to bring awareness to the all too real real issue of domestic violence later in life. My parents' divorce when I was 12 was a violent one. There is really no other way to say it. I watched my middle-aged mother chop up a statue with an axe in the front hallway, take a gun out and threaten to kill herself or my father. And worst of all, I watched her beat my dad's girlfriend bloody with a ring of keys in her hand. On our way home, my mom told me that she was probably going to have to deal with the police, and she wanted me to stay calm, whatever happened. Fortunately for us, the police called our house and invited her to come to the station. This was Newport Beach in the 80s, okay? What can I say? The charges had been dropped, miraculously, but she still had to appear and face some consequences. And when she returned, she told me that the police had treated her with remarkable kindness, despite her actions. That kindness and the consideration of those officers I never saw, had a huge effect on me. To this day, I am so grateful to them for preserving some measure of my mother's dignity. Their actions made me realize that the structures of government aren't only a place to keep law and order. They are there to serve the public on a deeper human level. Today, we recognize and honor the Los Angeles servants and officers who have, through their acts, attitudes, and efforts, been helping the public on a deeper human level this past year through their work intervening on behalf of those in need. We also recognize the special efforts of Molly Davies, whose organization, Wise and Healthy Aging, enhances the independence, dignity, and quality of life of older adults through leadership, advocacy, and innovative services. Ms. Davies is a 2015 Dr. Marjorie Browd Award recipient, and today we will celebrate her accomplishments, as well as gain more insight into what we can all do to raise awareness about the issue of domestic violence later in life. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of A Window Between Worlds, a not-for-profit organization that helps those affected by domestic violence heal through the act of making art, a process I can personally attest to having made a huge difference in my life. Cheryl Bookout and Executive Director and Founder Kathy Salzer are here today. There's a table here where you can make Pearls of Wisdom touchstones, which I have had the honor and pleasure of making one for myself that you can carry with you to recognize this day, and they invite you to join in creative solidarity with everyone who we are honoring today. Here in the Rotunda, we are going to hear from our esteemed guests next and award winners, followed by recognition of the council in the council chambers down the hall to mark Domestic Violence Awareness Month, followed by a presentation in the Tom Bradley Tower, woohoo, and a special recognition of the 2015 LAPD honorees, domestic abuse response team and their families. So first off, I would like to introduce Mike Feuer, City Attorney, whose motto should probably be, "Don't mess with Mike." In his first 2 years as City Attorney, Feuer has nearly tripled the neighborhood prosecutor program, launched a broad neighborhood school safety initiative, formed a strike force to combat illegal dumping, taken on wage theft, tackled substandard housing, cracked down on patient dumping, closed more than half the city's unlawful medical marijuana dispensaries, and instituted a program to protect immigrants from fraud, targeted polluters, and advanced environmental justice. He also went to Harvard, so he better be a good speaker. Please join me in welcoming Mike Feuer.
Thank you, Katie, for that no-pressure introduction. I really appreciate that. You know, I was thinking as you were talking, as one of the many term-limited officials in the room here, that given your career in daytime drama, isn't there room for a new one called The Hall? And I'm thinking maybe a few of us will be there for a casting call to talk through what happens day to day in City Hall. We'll talk later about that. I want to say a couple words about our chair of the Domestic Violence Task Force, Eve Sheedy. Eve, I have to say, Eve in our office, you know, the first time I had to start the woohoo, but this time it was spontaneous, Eve. That's great. No, you know, Eve for years has been in the forefront of some of the most innovative thinking about how we can advance meaningful domestic violence policies, and her chairmanship of the task force is indicative of the respect with which all members of the community hold Eve. So Eve, congratulations for earning that respect and for the work that you do. We are here to recognize not only the Domestic Violence Task Force Day of Action and the importance of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but also to highlight this key facet of domestic violence, the often unspoken, hidden, hard to see domestic violence perpetrated against older adults. I used to run a poverty law firm called BETSEDIC, which means House of Justice, where we focused on the legal needs, mostly of senior citizens and people who are disabled. And I know very well that this particular emphasis today is a long time in coming. I want to say a word of thanks to our DV service providers who are here today, to the LAPD officers who are so worthy of recognition today under the leadership of Chief Beck. I want to say a word of congratulations to Molly. Molly heads WISE, or now it's called Wise and Healthy Aging, but it was WISE when I was back in the old days working at BETSEDIC. And we were talking earlier about teamwork we've engaged in particular on behalf of senior citizens in nursing homes suffering abuse and neglect, often quietly without advocates. And now I have a theme song to accompany my remarks, which is always a good thing. And Katie, thank you very much for being here. And, you know, we were kidding around a little bit, but you add a level of poignance to today's commemoration that I think is really significant because it humanizes all too much the significance of the work we're here to recognize. I want to say also, Susan Strick is here. Where is Susan? Susan, well, step forward so people can see you. Where did Susan go? Here she is. All right. So Susan is the prosecutor in our office who leads our effort in going after domestic violence abusers and particularly focuses on elder abuse in the world of domestic violence. She prosecutes, she educates, and she is an activist in trying to shape informed policy on this issue. And Susan, you're a leader in our office, a leader in the community, a leader in this room. Congratulations for that work. So I want to, as we focus on issues of domestic violence, the word partnership can't be more important because none of us, from the city attorney's office to the police department to WISE to the providers, all of whom in this room do so much in the forefront, none of us can do it alone. We rely on each other. When we do it well, we exemplify the best of what public service can be when we form that kind of a team. Why is that teamwork so important? Well, for example, there is a grant underway. Our office, the mayor's office, LAPD, Wise and Healthy Aging, Jewish Family Services, a grant to help senior citizens. What's happened since that grant, now about 2 years in the making, has been underway? Our office has stepped up its prosecutions. There are 55% more people being prosecuted now for domestic abuse targeting seniors than there were before the grant. We've trained more than 100 LAPD officers in how to be sensitive responders to domestic violence calls. We trained our prosecutors. We trained domestic violence providers. This coordinated response team is so important. In the meantime, Molly, along with Susan, are co-chairing an elder abuse committee under the Domestic Violence Task Force. Teamwork, partnership, we need each other. And lastly, we have focused so much in recent days on the issue of gun violence. It's an issue that continues to pervade our society. The issue of the relationship between domestic violence and gun violence is one that needs to be highlighted. We know, for example, that the vast majority of women who are murdered by an intimate partner using a gun. We know that of mass shootings, which mean 4 people were murdered or more, in mass shootings, 57% are tied to domestic violence. I worked with the district attorney of Manhattan, Cyrus Vance Jr., to co-chair and found a group called Prosecutors Against Gun Violence, a national coalition for the first time in the history of the country of prosecutors focused on combating gun violence. That team is holding a summit later this month in Portland on domestic violence and gun violence, at which Eve will be a leading spokesperson. That relationship is one we can break if we find ways to enhance the partnerships we have and take advantage of the lessons we already know about taking guns away from those who are most at risk of perpetrating gun violence. Today is a day we focus on elder abuse and domestic abuse and the correlation between the two. But every day in the community we serve, each of you is in the front lines of making sure that when someone is a victim of domestic violence, there is someone there to reach out to them, to help lift them up, and to stay with them, not just that moment, but the next day and the day after. All of us honor that work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You are a beautiful speaker. Next up, we have Ron Galperin, City Controller. For many years, Ron has been a leading voice on reforming government, cutting waste, and helping businesses create jobs. As chair of the Los Angeles City Commission on Revenue Efficiency, CORE, Ron has found new revenue sources and budget savings to deliver more city services to residents. So if you want to know where your tax dollars are being spent, I suppose Ron is the guy to ask. Ron, would you like to share a few words? Please welcome Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for coming today, and what a great turnout this is as we are placing the focus that needs to be placed on the scourge of domestic violence. And many thanks, first of all, to all of those within our city government, including the great people at LAPD, led by Chief Beck, including our tremendous domestic violence task force and Eve Sheedy, the many service providers, the many individuals who are here, Wise and Healthy Aging, Window Between Worlds, and so many others. Now we're here today, of course, because the month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. But the truth is that this is not something that we should just be paying attention to on any given month, but on a daily basis. The LAPD responds to about 48,000 domestic violence calls on average each year. That translates into 131 a day. And imagine the lives that are impacted related to each and every single one of those 131 calls. We also know that domestic violence is incredibly underreported because there are too many people who are afraid or ashamed or financially dependent to even report it. And women, and particularly women of color in LA, are by far the most frequent victims. But it's not limited to any culture, gender, sexual orientation, age, or income group. And it leaves physical and emotional scars that go on for generations. Now, my office recently completed an audit of the city's domestic violence services and programs, which we launched this at the beginning of the month. Services that, as we all know, are absolutely vital to the people who live in Los Angeles. Now, by the way, you can take a look at a map that we've put online of domestic violence incidents at controlpanel.la. And in addition to the domestic violence incidents themselves, the map overlays other things such as neighborhood density, council districts, area incomes, census tract. You can even type in any address in the city of LA, where you live, where you work, and you can see the prevalence of domestic violence, at least as reported, and really get an idea of just how serious the problem is everywhere. Now, among the notable findings in our audit were that the city of LA spends way less than everybody else does when it comes to domestic violence. Only about $1.04 per capita. That's less than a quarter of what San Francisco spends, well less than New York. Now, as I said when I released my audit, as controller, I don't typically find myself saying, let's spend more money. But it's clear that in this case, we do have to make it a priority and that we do need to commit more funds. There's just no other way but to do so. We must do so. When auditors looked at the city's deployment of DART, domestic abuse response teams, we found that they only existed in 10 out of the 21 police divisions. And it is not a guarantee that a DART team solves every problem, but it's absolutely necessary that it be in each and every one of the divisions. So even before our audit was completed, I'm very pleased to say that the city, under Mayor Garcetti's leadership, has let contracts to expand the domestic violence abuse response teams to 21 divisions, to all the divisions, and I want to thank the mayor for that. Our second recommendation was that we have to have much more oversight and responsibility for the city's domestic violence services. There are a variety of different agencies and entities that each have a role, including the LAPD, the City Attorney's Office, the Mayor's Office of Public Safety, the Housing and Community Investment Department, the Domestic Violence Task Force. Each has had too little authority in and of itself, and we've made recommendations for how there can be better coordination and responsibility. Third, we have to expand prevention programs among teens and also, of course, even among the elderly, because we know that the cycle of violence just continues unless it is stopped. And fourth, there was the issue of miscategorization that we pointed out in our audit, and that was that quite a number of the incidents of domestic violence were just being reported as assault incidents in the records of LAPD. So I'm very pleased to say that there's been a great deal of action on this. LAPD now has a data integrity unit to address these concerns in the audit, and going forward, we're going to have accurate numbers. And one more thing. Right now, there's a lot of increased attention, and rightfully so, on homelessness. Now, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, domestic violence is the third leading cause of homelessness among families. And unfortunately, many homeless continue to experience domestic violence when they're on the streets. Therefore, addressing domestic violence helps to address homelessness, and addressing homelessness helps to address domestic violence. I salute the many valiant survivors of domestic violence, the many professionals, the volunteers who dedicate their lives to preventing and to healing the wounds of domestic violence, including, as I mentioned, so many of the wonderful people that we have in this city, and we've got a great contingency from LAPD. We are so fortunate to have you in our city. And I want to acknowledge the many community-based organizations with whom we partner to provide domestic violence services. We could not do what we do without your dedication, without your expertise. And thank you so very much to everybody for being a part of this today.
Would the members of the Domestic Violence Task Force come stand up here with us, please?
Thank you so much, Mr. Galperin. Clearly, I think we can all recognize the importance of your work and how essential it is to addressing these issues. We have with us also here today Mr. Mike Bonin, the council member for the 11th District of the City of Los Angeles. He is a community leader and grassroots activist with a track record for putting neighborhoods first and fighting for West Side residents for nearly 2 decades. John and I are West Side. Go West Side. In 2014, Bonin was voted Best Local Public Servant, elected in the Argonauts' annual Best of the West Side Reader Poll. I thought that was pretty cool. And his group is sponsoring this event. So let's please give him a warm welcome and thanks for this today.
Thank you for that intro. I'll see if I can make my remarks shorter than the intro, because there's a lot of speakers here today. I mainly just want to say thank you. There were a couple issues I wanted to touch on, but Controller Galperin, I just heard him as I was entering talking about homelessness and some of the issues I wanted to touch on. I just wanted to thank a few folks in particular for the work that they do on this issue every single day and for this event today. First of all, cannot say sufficient appreciation for the Domestic Violence Task Force that works hard all year long, out of the limelight, making sure that this issue stays on the radar screen of elected officials and the folks here in city government. Can we have a round of applause for the task force, please? And I want to do a collective round of applause for 3 public officials who have made this issue a priority. Our Controller, Ron Galperin, our Mayor, Eric Garcetti, and our City Attorney, Mike Feuer. Their work has been coupled by the phenomenal work that Chief Beck and the men and women of LAPD have been doing every day. There is never enough attention that can be paid to this issue, but we're starting to turn the tide. I want to thank the Controller for his phenomenal audit, and I want to thank all those from LAPD who are working to make sure that we expand the resources that we have in LAPD to make sure that nobody who is in distress, no victim of domestic violence, ever goes and has a call unanswered, has their cries unheeded, and is unable to stay in a safe house or a shelter in order to turn their lives around. I just want to thank everybody.
Next up, we have Councilmember David Rue, District 4. David is a native Los Angelino, yet newcomer to City Hall. He's had a career devoted to community-based mental health care and a long record of civic and community service. As they say, there's nothing like a newcomer to shake things up, so let's welcome Mr. Rue.
Good morning and thank you. As a former board member for the Center for Pacific Asian Families, which is one of the official domestic violence shelters in the city, I am proud to be standing here today with members of the Domestic Violence Task Force. Domestic violence is a public health and safety concern for all ages, races, genders, and sexual orientation. But children are particularly vulnerable as both victims and witnesses to domestic violence, sexual abuse, and assault. Children exposed to violence are most likely to attempt suicide, abuse drugs and alcohol, run away from home, engage in teen prostitution, and commit sexual assault crimes themselves. Nearly 16 million children are exposed to domestic violence a year, so we must continue to intervene and provide them with the services they need to save their young lives. Studies show that men exposed to physical, sexual, or domestic abuse as children are 4 times more likely to perpetuate domestic violence as adults. We must serve as role models for our children, teaching them the principles of healthy relationships so they don't grow up continuing the cycle of violence as adults. Domestic violence thrives when we are silent. But if we take a stand and work together, we can put a stop to it one neighborhood at a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rue. Now it is my honor to introduce Police Chief Charlie Beck. So I say a few words very quickly. Mr. Beck oversees the 3rd largest police department in the United States, managing 10,000 sworn officers and 3,000 civilian employees. Chief Beck is renowned for his ability to forge traditional policing methods and community outreach programs, tempered with the input of diverse stakeholders to form enduring crime abatement programs. Under his guidance, the rehabilitation of MacArthur Park was completed and received national recognition, including being awarded the Weber Safety Award for Community Policing. Please welcome Chief Beck.
Well, thank you very much. Last year, when we saw an increase in domestic violence in the city, the mayor and I talked about what to do. And before you today, you see the results of that. The expansion of the DART teams, the inclusion in the Domestic Violence Task Force, all these things were done to recognize a significant need. Because we save our city one family at a time. And that's what these men and women, that's what our DART teams do. Indulge me with a really short story here. Almost 40 years ago, I was a young police officer in the Venice area of this great city. At the time, there were no DART teams, and the response to domestic violence was strictly a keep the peace type response. But as police officers, you intuitively saw that this cycle of violence would continue and continue. So the procedure at the time, the unofficial procedure, was if you went to a residence where you felt there'd been multiple calls of anything, but in particular domestic violence, you would take your pencil. For those of you too young to remember, a pencil is a lead instrument that is easily erasable. You would take your pencil, and on the door frame to the front door, right up in the corner, inconspicuously, you would write your unit number, you know, in my case it was 14 Adam 45, and the date. And that's it. That's all you would put. Well, on this particular evening, I got a call, an unknown trouble call. I went to a house, and we found a family that had been murdered inside by the father. There was a young child and a young mother. And as I walked through that front door, I looked to my right and I looked on that door frame, and there were 6 annotations. This is the 6th time the police department had been to this house. And in my young police brain at the time, I thought, this is so wrong on so many levels. And if I ever get to a place where I can do something about this, I will. So in part, you see the response to that here. And let it be that no victim goes unresponded, that no family has to endure what that family did 40 years ago in Venice. I want to thank the members of the Los Angeles Police Department, and I want to thank my command staff. B. Gramala is here, Chief Gramala, and Kevin McCarthy's here from Detective Bureau. And while I take credit for what the Los Angeles Police Department does, they are the architects, and they are the architects of this response and many of the other pieces to this puzzle that we all must work together to solve. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Chief Beck. Your work is so important, and we are so grateful to everything that you do. It is my honor next to introduce Los Angeles Mayor, the Honorable Eric Garcetti, who I believe is one of LA's coolest mayors. Despite being a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford, he still knows the proper way to toast a hockey team. He's the city's first elected Jewish mayor and its youngest in more than a century. Mayor Garcetti has already made strong steps to change Los Angeles for the better. He has pledged to end chronic and veteran homelessness, and through the 10,000 Strong initiative, more than 100 employers agreed to hire veterans. He is taking strong steps to help LA become the leading destination for people starting new businesses, and has created the city's first ever sustainable city plan aimed at making the city more economically and environmentally sustainable. He may not have many credits on his IMDb page, but he's working on it. but he's also doing his best to expand California's film tax credit, which would mean keeping more jobs at home here for the people who are in the entertainment industry, which always helps LA. I also understand he plays a mean jazz rendition of Melancholy Baby. Honored as the 2014 Person of the Year by the NAACP, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Eric Garcetti.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie, and a very happy birthday to you as well. It is so wonderful. What a great turnout this year. This is my 15th year, and this may be the strongest turnout we've ever had. So congratulations to everybody. Let me give some thank yous, of course, to Eve Sheedy, who, as our great chair, has helped bring this all together. Where do you go? There, she's hiding in the back as she usually does, but give Eve another round of applause. And the entire domestic violence task force membership, who are just extraordinary volunteers, who I know do it for the high pay that you get. Let's give them a round of applause and thank them as well. This is actually our third gathering. What I love about this month is this is the third time we've come together already in front of the press about domestic violence. Our city controller released an audit, and my wife and I joined him for that. We talked about the expansion of the DART teams, and I want to thank the DART providers who are here. A dream of mine for over a decade to have DART teams in every single police division, and to continue working on that. And an incredible city council, Mike Bond and David Rue, a chief who understands and gets this, a city attorney who understands domestic violence, and together with the district attorney, make sure prosecutions are happening. We've got our international support when we know that this is an international city that requires the participation of the Consular Corps, and I want to thank Gilberto Luna Moises, who's the Deputy Consul General de Mexico, who is here as well. A Window Between Worlds, which has this extraordinary art exhibition that is up here too, and that we've been a part of for many years. And congratulations to Molly Davies as well. You know, when we look at domestic violence, it's tough. Every year we come here and we're like, well, what new are we going to say? And part of it is just being here and repeating, and repeating, and repeating, and repeating, because there's always somebody who is coming of age and experiencing dating violence. There's somebody in a new relationship who for the first time is faced with this violence. There are new children who are experience domestic violence in the home for the first time. So it is important to repeat the same thing over and over. But second, the Domestic Violence Task Force always adds a new angle, and I appreciate the focus this year on violence happening to those who are later in life. But a third thing that I wanted to add is that I think we're beginning to see two things: the interconnectivity of violence in our community and our world, and also the importance of this not being an issue area but a value proposition that we hold. When I became mayor, the things that I cared most about, I said I don't want to just be kind of a progressive mayor that cares about the environment, cares about gender equity, and that peripheralizes or segregates those things off to a few people who work on them really, really hard. And all of you activists know what I'm talking about, where you live kind of lonely, isolated lives working on those issues. You find each other, but it's not a mainstream thing. It is my goal with domestic violence for this to be a prism that all leaders and employees and residents of the city refract many of the issues we face, whether it's a rise in crime or gang violence, whether it's looking at educational attainment when children are in a violent environment, that we begin to see that things like poverty and graduation rates and health are all part of what we are doing when we look to eradicate domestic violence. That in other words, what we are doing is not just for those, it is for all of us, and the best way to end this is not to keep dealing with it after it happens, but to look at the interconnectivity of all of this, and at all of its causes, its root causes, we aim to stop it in its tracks. We know that domestic violence so often lives in shadows, and let me repeat something I say every year for our great members of the press that are here today as well. If you or somebody else needs help, we are here to help. Call now, 1-800-799-SAFE, which will connect you with either the police and or local service providers, people who can help you today get out of that situation you think you can't get out of. Or visit safela.org. Do it. Do it now. Tenemos la ayuda por las víctimas de la violencia doméstica. Llama a 800-70-99, I don't have all the numbers for SAFE. I'll get that. I'll come back for the Spanish in a moment. O visite la página de web safela.org. In an emergency, of course, always call 911. If it's that bad, call 911. En una emergencia, llama 911. We also know that beyond the immediate help that is there, what we can do collectively is to look at how violence touches all of us, whether it's those folks that are on death row and they have committed some of the worst crimes. Well, we wonder how we could have unwound that. One study showed over 80% of them grew up in very violent households where they learned violence and saw violence. Not that it's excusable what gets you on death row, but we can do something about ending that. When you look at graduation rates, those places where we see higher incidents of dating, partner, and domestic violence for students, we see lower graduation rates. Not surprising. Where we see domestic violence in higher numbers, and we should remind ourselves domestic violence does not discriminate. It is white, it is black, it is Asian, it is brown, it is young, it is later in life, it is same partner, it is different partner, it is every gender. We know that that violence that touches all of us is right around us, and we can play a role in doing something about it. So what are we doing here at City Hall? One, we've expanded this year, as I mentioned, DART teams to be in every single police division. Thank you to the private donors, to the City Council, and to the public folks who have stepped up to fund that this year. Let's keep that going every single year to make sure that there are providers who roll out with our officers every single time. Two, we're looking at gender equity, which I think is a very important part overall of achieving better momentum on domestic violence. For the first time in our history, over half of our city commissioners are women. We need to model leadership at all levels so that we can address gender inequities. And I want to thank those women who serve both in leadership positions in our departments and also those who have stepped up to be commissioners as well. Third, the executive directive that I put out on the day that the controller's audit came forward Ask every single city department to designate somebody who will be on a new domestic violence, on a working group for domestic violence that will enhance what the Domestic Violence Task Force is doing, and finally give the Domestic Violence Task Force some legs inside every department. This isn't just a police issue. This isn't just a fire paramedic issue. Whether it's the Bureau of Sanitation, whether it's the libraries, whether it's our Cultural Affairs Department, every single department has a role in ending domestic violence, not just among our own employees, but think about it, we touch every single person in this city. Somebody comes into a library, and if a librarian can spot those signs and give somebody help, that librarian can save a life. In our Rec and Parks program, if a rec assistant can see those signs in a child or notice something, we can make sure that that person is taken out of that violent situation before it gets worse. So that move of making sure that we have this working group for the first time in our city's history will make sure all departments, all 37 city departments, play a role in making sure that happens. At the airports, when somebody arrives who's coming here even from another country, we can see the signs of whether they come from an abusive relationship before they feel lost as an immigrant, maybe without even their papers, and feel lost in what is happening and to feel powerless. We can change that as well. I also want to thank the folks who are looking at a multidisciplinary approach, and this is the last thing I'll say, to addressing abuse later in life, the focus of this year. In collaboration with the City Attorney's Office, with the Police Department, and WISE and Healthy Aging and Jewish Family Services of Los Angeles, and thanks to a $400,000 grant we collectively received from the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women, we will bring awareness and enhance training and services to end violence against and abuse of women later in life. We've already trained 100 officers with this, and thank you to our officers who are here. You are the front line every single year. I love seeing you come forward, and what you have done to save lives and transform lives, we owe you a huge debt of gratitude. And we've also provided funding, though, because I know how frustrating it is for you when you pass something off, and if the courts aren't ready, we're providing funding for prosecutors and judges, very importantly, to attend trainings to enhance their ability to prosecute cases of abuse later in life as well. So thank you to everybody. Brevemente también en español, yo quiero decir unas palabras. Cada octubre nos unimos en decir que cada niño tiene el derecho a crecer libre de la violencia, que ningún angeleno debería vivir temiendo llegar a casa. Este año nuestro enfoque son las mujeres que son víctimas de la violencia doméstica. Una parte integral de nuestros esfuerzos es nuestro equipo de violencia doméstica. Y gracias a su trabajo y el trabajo de tantos angelenos dedicados a esta causa, vamos a salvar más vidas, ayudar a más víctimas y proveer esperanza a aquellos que los necesitan. Juntos podemos poner un alto a este ciclo. Thank you again very much. Let's make this one of the last years we have to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mayor Garcetti. Muchas gracias. Next, we have Laura Guglielmo, Executive Officer for the Housing and Community Investment Department of Los Angeles.
Thank you and good morning. At the Housing and Community Investment Department, we're so proud to support our partners in the combating domestic violence, those city partners, the LAPD, the City Attorney's Office, and the Domestic Violence Task Force. But we also really want to thank and acknowledge and appreciate our partners in this war against domestic violence, and those are our service providers. The Housing and Community Investment Department administers the funding for 8 domestic violence shelters throughout the city of Los Angeles that provide 743 much-needed safe beds for victims of domestic violence and their families. That's not nearly enough, but these shelters, they also provide the much-needed support services for the victims to help prepare and empower them to take back their lives and permanently end their domestic violence abuse. So we want to thank these partners, and we want to acknowledge Controller Galperin mentioned that there is inadequate funding for domestic violence, and there's certainly inadequate funding for these shelters. Our partners do an amazing job of leveraging private funds to support these much-needed beds, and we want to thank them and acknowledge them today. Thank you.
One other acknowledgement I forgot is our gang reduction and youth development workers, our grid workers who are here today, are for the first time being trained on domestic violence, all of them, and thank you for the work they do. Thanks.
Just for the sake of time, I'm going to just quickly mention our next speaker, who is Gilberto Luna Moises, Deputy Consul General, Consulado General de Mexico in Los Angeles, Departamento de Protección, representing the Mexican Consulate.
Thank you very much. Good morning. It is an honor for me to participate on behalf of the Consulate General of Mexico in Los Angeles in this year's Day of Action Against Domestic Violence. This is a crime. This is a crime that affects large numbers of people regardless of their race, their culture, their gender, or their age. As it has been said this morning, thousands of cases are reported to the authorities every year, but countless of them go unnoticed due to the victim's fear or the victim's vulnerability or the victim's lack of information. At the Consulate General of Mexico, we have developed a campaign to encourage our community to report domestic violence, to learn how to prevent it, and to be aware of all the resources available for the victims and their families. More than 300,000 people visit our premises every year to request some kind of service. This obviously presents a great challenge for us, but it also gives us an opportunity to address effectively the issues that affect the Latino community. Every day we deliver the message to hundreds of men and women at the consulate premises. Over the past 6 years, the Mexican consulate has carried out a program called Voluntades, which aims to provide care to victims of crime and domestic violence, assisting them with legal representation, with documentation, and when necessary and possible, with financial support. This program began as a partnership between government agencies and community organizations that provide crucial services for the Mexican community. Within the framework of this program, the Mexican Consulate has funded more than 2,300 cases, disbursing over $2.1 million since its implementation in 2009. This was made possible by a new law enacted in Mexico about 8 years ago, which allowed our Congress to provide funds for the Mexican consulates in the United States to collaborate with local authorities to try and eradicate this crime within our community. The Consul General of Mexico in Los Angeles, through our Department of Protection, which is led by Patricia Perez, who is here this morning, and who participates very actively in the task force, offers care and guidance to the victims of domestic violence, either providing funds for the legal actions that might come or referring them to the competent attorneys and institutions specialized in this subject. With the support of numerous community organizations, the Mexican Consulate has been sponsoring parental lessons, support sessions, conferences, seminars, and group therapies at our premises. All these services are open to anyone who speaks Spanish, regardless of their nationality or their immigration status. We know for a fact that there are victims who fail to report this crime because they think that they could be deported if they call the police. Our daily message to our community: not in Los Angeles. We recognize the work, the commitment, and the decision, the efforts, everyday efforts of the Los Angeles Police Department to protect the rights of the victims of domestic violence, including those of immigrants. We also recognize and appreciate very much the leadership of the city authorities, starting with Mayor Eric Garcetti and council members Mike Bonin, our sponsor today, and Mr. David Rue, of course, City Attorney Mike Fuhrer, and Chief Beck. We also want to acknowledge, the great work done by Ms. Evie Sheedy, who is the Los Angeles Domestic Violence Task Force Chair. And we want to reiterate the commitment. I want to reiterate on behalf of the Consul General of Mexico, Mr. Carlos Ada, the commitment of our consulate to continue participating actively in the Domestic Violence Task Force to try and eradicate this crime from our community. Thank you very much.
Each year, the Domestic Violence Task Force presents the Marjorie Browdy Award to an individual or agency for their innovative collaboration in the field. Wait a second, where's Molly? Oh, okay. The award honors the memory of Marjorie Browdy, founder of the DV Task Force, who recognized the need to bring together all members of the city family in order to effectively address domestic violence. As my boss said, partnership is the key. This year, the Marjorie Browdy Award goes to Molly Davies. Ms. Davies is the Vice President, Elder Abuse Prevention and Ombudsman Services at WISE and Healthy Aging. She's been a long-term care ombudsman for 15 years, overseeing the largest ombudsman program in the nation. She and her team provide coverage to 1,880 nursing and assisted living facilities with the capacity to serve more than 76,000 residents. Molly also runs the Elder Abuse Prevention Program, which includes conducting training on elder abuse in the Elder Justice Intervention Network. She designed and gained funding for a program within the agency's Mental Health Services Department that provides field-based psychotherapy for elder abuse survivors. Molly represents her agency in a project administered by the Mayor's Office, the Later in Life Advocacy, Counseling, and Collaboration Program, which, as you've heard, includes WISE and Healthy Aging, the City Attorney's Office, LAPD, and Jewish Family Service. The project focuses on bringing together those working in elder abuse and those working in the domestic violence field. Molly chairs the California Elder Justice Coalition and is president of the California Long-Term Ombudsman Association. Recently, in her free time, she agreed to co-chair a committee on elder abuse that will operate under the Domestic Violence Task Force. Importantly, and as you can tell from her long list of outstanding accomplishments, Molly is the go-to person. Whenever a question comes up that even touches on elder abuse, the response is always, "You should call Molly." She is truly an innovative collaborator. On behalf of the Domestic Violence Task Force, it is my honor to present the 2015 Marjorie Browdy Award to Molly Davies.
Thank you. Oh boy, okay. So I talk a lot professionally, and I'm pretty comfortable doing it, but you all make me a little nervous, so let me just put that out there. I want to thank the Domestic Violence Task Force for bestowing such an amazing honor on me. I don't think that I'm worthy of it. I just go to work and do my job every day. Professionally, this is an award that I share with my partners in the field, many of whom are here today. You know who you are, like it or not. Survivors of domestic violence in later life have unique needs and challenges that as a society we are failing to address. A 90-year-old woman who's being assaulted by her spouse and who's mildly cognitively impaired has very different needs than a 20-year-old survivor with children. Bunk beds are a great solution to maximize space at a domestic violence shelter, but become a barrier for an elder with limited mobility. We need to be thinking about services and program design that provides the greatest access for all survivors, regardless of age. The City of Los Angeles has, through the Later in Life Advocacy, Counseling, and Collaboration Project, has made a commitment to identifying and addressing needs of older survivors through this collaboration, which you've heard about. We lovingly refer to it as LILAC. And it's been an honor to be part of that effort. It's a very, very collaborative team. We all have very different roles and responsibilities, but we're always very open to seeing what the possibilities are. As mentioned, the grant seeks to facilitate a bridge between the domestic violence and elder justice intervention networks that tend to work in isolation when sometimes we have shared clients that would benefit from the expertise of one network or the other, or both. Already we've seen a shift in the way that we practice through working through this grant. We're sharing resources, knowledge, and promising practices, and ultimately creating better outcomes for survivors. Personally, this is a award that I share with my family. My grandmother was a victim of domestic violence. She never sought help. She hid in the shadows. She was also an abuser, perpetuating the cycle of violence with her children. My mother had the courage to break the cycle of violence that was present in her family of origin. Not an easy road for her, not an easy road for those of us who love her, but well worth the fight. I'm a product of what's possible when the cycle of violence is truly broken. Thank you to all of you for your commitment to end domestic violence at any age, one person, one family at a time. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Molly Davies. It's just so inspiring, your work and your story. It means so much, I think, to everyone here, truly. In closing, I would like to thank all of you for your time and effort, your caring and consideration that you have given towards helping those affected by domestic violence, in particular, later in life. Your efforts have not gone unnoticed. I can assure you, you have made a huge difference in the lives of families and individuals. It is so important in this time of intense media scrutiny and what can feel like public cynicism that we recognize the worthiness of setting our intentions high, the worthiness of living life dedicated to public service, and the worthiness of recommitting every day to making even one life better. The men and women gathered here today know what that means. So one more time, thank you, and thank you all so much for your efforts and your service. Next, we will be gathering in the council chambers